what that leaves us with as a health community is services that is a significant funding gap in terms of the way we're currently spending money, and choices to be made about how we spend it best to make sure that we can meet the future demands of an increasing population and an older population. We think that there is an argument for what we call understanding that you need to provide more funding to sustain a range of services in a remote location. That is really one of the things that the review will need to address. It's not the Barnstable issue within that is only one of the issues that we need to address, but the idea that we will need to consider, if you like, subsidising additional services and additional capacity within Barnstable in order to maintain safe services is something that we will be exploring. I can't tell you what the outcome of that will be, but it is acknowledged as something that we need to look at.
If this report was acknowledged as something to be followed, and you got the extra money, was that extra money then put into Barnstable?
It would be incredibly difficult to follow through £500,000 on a budget of 1.1 billion, and I don't have the figures for what the contracts are worth. But suffice to say, contracts for acute hospitals generally go up year on year. I couldn't say off the top of my head. I would need to take a question away and answer that for you more fully.
Are you actually going to be taking any of these points back with you, or is this just a pointless exercise in regard that we're telling you how we feel, or our concerns, but are you actually going to take those concerns back to anyone else or whoever these people who are making these decisions?
Okay, so as I think I've pointed out, this is not part of the formal consultation process that we're currently undertaking. We do need to have those conversations with you, and we will do once we start the consultation. People are at liberty to write in and talk to us about services at any point in time, with or without a consultation process. But I'm here on my own this evening. I've got no one making notes. If someone is writing down questions, I'm happy to take them away. This is, as far as I'm concerned, this is not part of a formal consultation process.
And the other thing I wanted to ask, you're talking about New Devon, so what is supposed to be New Devon? I mean, South Devon and North Devon are completely separate and completely different animals with completely different needs, because South Devon is, and even when we talk about East Devon, people in East Devon are still closer to Exeter. I mean, you're hardly anywhere from Exeter, but you know, they don't have to go as far as people from North Devon. And as someone pointed out earlier, if you live in Martin, Limmer, it already takes nearly an hour to get to North Devon Hospital. And even, you know, there's problems even if you get treated, because say, well, I'm not sure, but you have a broken limb and you live in a Limmer, and you have to go back the following week. It's really difficult to get from Limmer to Barnstable. Can't drive yourself. There's no facilities, very few buses. So if you were then having to go to Exeter or Taunton instead, it would be completely impossible. So I don't, you know, it seems the three things that are most important to people. You know, it's well known that if you're having a stroke, you need the best response is to get treatment within 3 hours. If it's going to take you nearly 2 hours to get to the hospital, you've got no chance, have you? And then there's people who are having babies, and there's difficulties, and they've not always known till the end. People who have twins, you know, it's very, you know, it's frightening. If I was a young mum now, I had twins when I was younger, and I know if I was having them now, I would be very, very frightened at the thought that I couldn't get to hospital, and I would possibly lose one or both of those children because I need the extra care. And then the other thing is like accident and emergency. They're the three most vital things that people here need. You know, you talk about the ageing population, and there is a higher percentage of ageing population in North Devon because people retire here from other parts of the country. So it just, you know, it just seems, you know, a lot of scared people about what's going to happen in this situation. But it seems pointless for us to express these views if none of it's going to be carried forward anywhere. We're just talking to you in the street, and you're not, this isn't part of your consultation, so it's absolutely meaningless. It seems, you know,
How are we going to because I couldn't agree more. Having a baby is one of the most, you know, it is a very, it can be a very, well, it is a very frightening thing. It is. Having a baby is one of, you know, you are scared. And the thought, as I understand it, that we could lose our maternity service here, where I'm obviously way beyond that time, but it's just, to me, it's a completely unbelievable, terrifying thought. It's just beggars belief that you would think of taking away maternity, as well as all the others as well, like, you know, for stroke. It's just, where is this idea, you know, where on earth is all this coming from? It's just, I know it's finance, but people will die, there's no doubt about it. There will be mothers and babies who will die, without a doubt.
Take that lady first, because she hasn't asked a question, and then I'll come back to you.
Exeter, and you have Plymouth, but they're not going to cope anyway with the extra business coming through the door. You're not only going to be taking 2 or 3 hours to get there, you're going to be in the hallway on a conveyor belt of tying up ambulance drivers because they can't get their patients in. Are you going to build new hospitals in these cities? If so, why aren't we using the old ones?
So there's no plans to build new hospitals. I said at the beginning of when I was talking about other parts of the system that we also need to change that aren't working effectively at the moment. I mentioned a figure of between 500 and 600 people on any one day who are occupying a hospital bed that don't need to be there.
That's because you closed the nursing home.
Well, we don't. Nursing homes are independent organisations. We don't close them unless they're not safe. Right. So, but the reason for closing the community beds was so that we could invest more services in the community, in primary care and so on. The work that we've done shows that keeping patients in hospital beds when they don't need to be there is actually detrimental to their health, and they will deteriorate more quickly than if we get them home in a timely fashion. The thing that stops most people getting home from hospital is the lack of available community services and social care packages. In order for us, given that we're facing financial challenges, in order for us to free up the money, we need to reduce the number of beds that have got patients in them that shouldn't be there anyway, and put that money instead into community services, and that's what we've done. One of the pieces of work that we've done around the East Devon scenario is relevant in this case. When you look at funding the nursing costs of running a 16-bedded community hospital ward, which is about the size of a number of the community hospitals that we have, it costs about £250,000 a month. And the sort of average throughput of patients is about 21, so we can care for about 21 people in that month. If you take that same £75,000 and you spend it on community services, you can provide care to around 80 people a month. So it's almost 4 times the amount.
That's on the 15-minute each per day?
No, it's on the model that we're currently trying to adopt. In the changes that we're making as part of the proposals in East Devon, and some of which have been already implemented in North Devon.
3 questions. Just in the corner, and there's the gentleman over there. So start.
Yeah, I've listened to what you said about part of the plan is that some people would better to go past the door of the local hospital to a bigger hospital next to a Plymouth. You need to get somebody who's working out the formulas to drive from here to the RD&E in Exeter and try and park their car. 5 years ago, my partner was down in RD&E with a heart attack. I used to have to go and visit her every day, and on average it took me 45 minutes to find a car parking space. Now, if you're going to ease off on Barnstable, I think whoever's doing the formula wants to be aware of the mess he's going to create, or she's going to create, by sending people to Exeter rather than go to Barnstable. Bear in mind, to my knowledge, there's probably 2,000 houses are going to be built in this area or are under construction now. Multiply that by 4, 5 or 6 or whatever you want to do. It's just going to make the clinical cover in this area an absolute nightmare for the people who live here. So it's all very well somebody in an office somewhere saying, well, according to our formula, we're going to give you so much, and oh, well, you're Barnstable, we'll give you a little bit more. They need to make our hospital now bigger in reality, because I haven't been in the hospital for a while, but 3 years ago I had hernia done there, and I had to wait probably 3 months after that it was diagnosed before I went in and had it sorted. So I think whoever's working out this formula wants to think very seriously about the mayhem they're going to cause if they shut any part of Barnstable Hospital. Okay?
Yes.
How much was it you said we saved by closing beds in Braunton, for example?
I didn't say, and I'm afraid and I don't have those numbers with me this evening.
But could I ask you what you've done, how you've invested that money so that we have community care in Braunton, so that there's care in the community? How's the money being invested? How is it?
So the care model that we've started to implement in North Devon comprises of 3 key elements. A comprehensive assessment which enables us to anticipate more readily the sorts of people who are likely to get into difficulty, so whether it's the frail older people or people with a number of long-term conditions who are likely to get worse. Having a thorough assessment of those people is one aspect of it, which enables us to pre-plan more effectively. The second aspect of it is what we call a single point of access for professionals. So at the moment, if you've got a GP who's trying to, let's say, do a home visit for someone on a Saturday afternoon, it can take them without that service, it can take them 45 minutes or an hour just to do numbers of different phone calls to try and work out what sort of care that person can then benefit from to avoid them having to go into hospital. The single point of access enables the GP to make one phone call and to someone to coordinate that care. The third element of the care is what we call a rapid response. So if someone is needing to get out of hospital quickly because the bed is needed for someone else, or if we want to avoid someone going into hospital, actually community services need to be able to respond much more quickly, and in order to do that they need more capacity, they need more people to be able to do that. So the money's been invested in increasing the numbers of community staff, the numbers of contacts, and trying to avoid people getting ill in the first place. And the evidence that we've had so far in terms of the impact on the hospital is that it's actually been quite beneficial in terms of the acute hospital, in terms of helping to keep, in fact, the growth in emergency admissions in North Devon is lower than it is in other parts of Devon. And in fact, last year, North Devon Hospital coped better with winter pressures than the other 2 acute hospitals in Devon.
I want to know about the people in Braunton. You know, they have their community hospital. How much care is each patient getting? Are they getting 4-hour care they would have in hospital?
Well, not necessarily, because some of the people who were in those hospital beds didn't need 24-hour care. They might have needed some support with washing and dressing, they might have needed some help with getting in and out of bed in the morning. They didn't necessarily need 24-hour care. I guess that's the point of the model that we're trying to pursue, is that some of those people are in bed and they don't need to be there. We're not doing anything with them medically to treat them. They're simply sitting in a bed waiting for something else to happen. And at the moment what we're trying to do is to speed up that process and to avoid them having to sit in the bed in order to get the care they need. So if someone needs a bed, so if not necessarily completely looking after themselves, there's quite a lot we can do in the home that is not necessarily about complete self-care. So we have things like hospital at home services, we obviously have social care packages, district nursing services and so forth. If someone is not well enough to be looked after in that setting with a range of care around them, they would be in a hospital bed. But what we're trying to do more is, rather than leaving a person sitting in that bed where they might get an infection or get bed sores, actually what we need to be doing is focusing our community hospital beds on what we call active rehabilitation. So if you've had a stroke or if you've had a respiratory illness, you need rehabilitation, which is a much more active process. It is, but we don't need as many community beds as we've got at the moment.
But if it can't be in North Devon District Hospital because they're open beds, then if they still need rehabilitation, surely they should be in Torrington or Southampton or Ilfracombe or Linton. Have having rehabilitation there? Because if they're at home, how much time are you giving these people at home?
So I can't talk specifically because it depends on the person's individual need. That the point of care packages is they need to be tailored to people's needs. We need to listen to what people need, what sort of how they are coping at home and what needs to be there. It is not viable clinically or financially to keep open and very small units of community hospital beds any longer. We need to have units of at least 16 beds, and for those 16 beds you need to have a much bigger catchment population than we would have historically had in the way that we used to use community hospital beds. So that's why we've made some of the changes. So the people that need active rehabilitation should still be in a hospital bed, probably in a community hospital bed. But the idea that we have hospital beds that serve individual towns or villages or groups of villages is no longer how we can configure services. We have to have services that serve much bigger populations in order to make them viable. And that's not just because of money, it's also to do with increasing demand on services and the fact that far fewer people need to stay in a hospital bed now than 20 years ago. The NHS bed stock since 1948 has continued, has been on a steady decline all of that time. The number of patients overall that the NHS treats has gone up massively, much steeper than the numbers of beds have reduced. That is that's a fact that relates to just how far technology can take you in terms of how patients are treated. To be putting people in beds if they don't need to be there is frankly harmful and is not something that clinically we should be supporting. We need to be trying to get people home, and actually the concept of convalescence is also something that people may remember. Convalescing in a community hospital after you've had a period in hospital. That again is generally the latest thinking on that kind of approach is that it's actually harmful to people because it limits your mobility, you get muscle wastage, you're at much greater risk of infection. If you can come out of hospital and go straight home with the right care package, your chances of recovery are likely to be much greater than if you spend longer in a community hospital bed. That is at the heart of the care model that we are trying to deliver. And yes, it does mean reducing the numbers of overall the numbers of beds that are available.
The gentleman there, then the lady there, and then we've got a lady over there, the gentleman over there. No, sir, there's something I haven't had a chance to speak yet. So.
Well, perhaps I don't want to, but I think I've got
But I'm sorry, we've got 4 people waiting. Please.
Hello. Okay. Now then, just a couple of facts. The figures for the 13-person panel of the NEW, the Northern, Eastern, Western CCG website, the cost at the very minimum is £1,225,000 in salary. That's the very minimum. I've calculated that based on the lower end of the range that these people are. Their details are on their website, so this is nothing secret or private. It is on the website. So that's one thing, that's a fact. Another fact, Torrington. I live in Torrington and I have been involved for the last 3 years plus in a campaign called Stitch, Save the Irreplaceable Torrington Community Hospital, whose beds were removed in July 2013, all of them, without consultation. Now, it was claimed that the Torrington experiment, as it was called, would mean that people would get treated closer to home, as the speaker has said, and that it would be more successful than having beds, the 10 remaining beds in the hospital. Well, I have 5 cases here, which I'm not going to read out the 5, but I will read just 2 to remind the speaker that it didn't work in Torrington, and that is the reason why it is currently being submitted to the Secretary of State for a second time, because all the evidence wasn't given in the first time. It is being submitted to the Secretary of State that the Torrington experiment was a flawed consultation because in the report done by Dr. Helen Tucker, not a medical doctor, but an independent assessor, who was called in to do a report on what happened, she said that the basis for success would be, or she measured the basis of success, that it would be equal or better to the situation that was there before, i.e. the community hospital. And she had 7 recommendations to say that it wasn't. And one of them, or 2 of them, are here. M, sent home after following a serious op, spent 10 days in ICU, then 7 days on the ward, then sent home alone. Neighbour found her in a chair with bags and medication, alone, cold and hungry. She was promised help and community nurse to do dressings and to do the pump. Nothing organised from the North Devon District Hospital. Became very agitated and frightened. Had to be readmitted to North Devon District Hospital. Was again sent home in early hours of the morning. Confused, unable to remember her key number to get in. Neighbour, elderly herself, came to help. One more. B's husband was dying in the North Devon District Hospital. He wanted to come home to Torrington Hospital to die. He and his wife were told that there were no beds at Torrington Cottage Hospital. The wife knew there was, as staff did admit so. Freedom FOI, Freedom of Information, also found that there were empty beds available at Torrington Cottage Community Hospital. The man died at North Devon District Hospital. Now, just one other thing, one other fact before I finish, and I won't take up any more of the meeting. One of the people who has made statements about what is going to happen with these cuts, and I think that's what we should be talking about here, we have been given the emperor's new clothes and expected to believe it. This is an exercise about cuts, and I'm going to quote Professor Chris Ham, the Chief Executive of the King's Fund Health think tank, of whom Dame Ruth Carnell, who is in charge of the success regime, laughably called, she is a trustee. She is also a member of Carnell Farrell Consultancy, which consulted on the STP that we're now talking about. So she is in charge of this operation, the top person. She consulted, was asked, her company consulted on the planning for this, and now they're going to try and implement it, which could mean the removal of the acute services at North Devon District Hospital. And Professor Chris Ham of that King's Fund Health think tank said this. He said that downgrades of certain services were painful but necessary. Quote, "It is not just an exercise in NHS cuts. That would be the wrong interpretation. For both A&E and maternity services, it's been recognised for a long time that these sorts of changes, concentrating the workforce and expertise in a smaller number of hospitals, are likely to benefit patients. The public may be understandably concerned about travelling further to access A&E care, but in many cases, that will be a price worth paying for a higher standard of care, and the same would apply to maternity services. Overall, this is a painful process that the NHS has to go through," added Ham. Now, this is the professor of a think tank. He is prepared to see people die. There is no other way you can interpret that, because it's no good saying we'll have the expertise in a hospital in Exeter or Plymouth or Musgrove Park in Taunton if the people who are to benefit from those services can't get there because they have to travel over 100 miles to get there. If you're from Lynmouth to go to Plymouth with a stroke, you're not even going to get to Oakhampton in the 45 minutes that is required for you to have any chance of a reasonable chance of survival. So that's a parent, a mother with a serious maternity issue is not going to make it if they have to drive the long distance from somewhere like Barnstaple or Lynmouth to Exeter. It's not going to happen. Have you road tested all these different scenarios in different forms of weather? When there's flooding, when there's snow, when there's wind, when there's traffic, when there's an accident which closes a road on an A road and you can't get an ambulance past? Are there enough ambulances, as has been said before? We know that in the NEW area, last year alone, there were 800 cases of stroke. In North Devon, there was about 400 of those were in North Devon. Now, I can't guarantee, and I can't tell you, and I bet you can't tell me, that every one of those people were treated at North Devon District Hospital with an ambulance. They had to be driven in, many of those people, and in some cases, people have to travel by public transport to get to hospital and to visit these people. So it is outrageous to even think, to even contemplate that you would consider removing the acute services from the second most remote hospital in the country, as you pointed out. Thank you.
Can I just respond by saying that as yet there are no proposals to remove the services, as you say. That is not. There is nothing that we have done yet which suggests that is what we're going to do. The review has just started, and it will report and will be consulted on in the summer of next year. That's the point at which we will be open and transparent about the decisions that we would wish to make, and we'll be consulting properly with the public on those decisions. At the moment, there are no plans to change the services in the way that you've described.
You said there are no red lines. You're looking at everything, so it means you could plan to do that.
That's right.
Exactly.
We don't need a degree in statistics to work out the probability of change, and it's not positive.
Well, the probability of change is 100%. There will be changes. There's no doubt about that.
I'm saying the probability of change is negative. It has to be because you took money out of the system.
You're right. So the job that we have as custodians of that £1.1 billion that we get each year is to make sure that we spend it as wisely as we possibly can. If we subsidise and increase levels of service so that every person in North Devon were able to access full medical services within, let's say, 30 minutes to an hour, that would be phenomenally more expensive than the care we're currently providing. In the context of increasing demand for care and an ageing population, we have to balance the extent to which we can invest in very expensive high-tech services against recognising that there's a huge amount more people who would not be able to access care if all we do is provide services and fund the top end of services and make the access absolutely equitable across the whole of Devon. Those are the stark choices that we face. We need to have robust conversations with you about how we will arrive at those proposals. But you say if an ambulance has to drive past a hospital to go somewhere else, someone may die. That may be the case, but we have to balance that against the whole range of other people who may not have access to any services at all, and that may also lead to that ultimate outcome.
With respect, and I don't need to feel insulted by this, you're the piano player, and we need to speak to the conductor.
Who would you like to speak to?
I'd like to speak to the director who can make representation.
So those proposals have not yet been developed.
But we want the voice before that goes on. Yes.
Why spend more money?
So that is the process of engagement in the work. So as the proposals are developed, we'll be looking to talk to communities about how those models and how those proposals are developed. We will be talking to people through the normal process.
When we get to that stage, if I have first-hand experience,
Come on, there's an order
my
here.
son is
Speak.
disabled, he's an epileptic, and he nearly died going to hospital where I used to live years ago in Buckinghamshire when they did exactly the same scenario. They closed Wickham Hospital, shrunk it down to practically nothing, and moved everything to make this big super hospital elsewhere. And I had to drive straight past that hospital, being blue-nighted, to that new hospital. It took over 40 minutes, he practically died in an ambulance. I've seen these things happening, and that was in Buckinghamshire, in a very affluent, busy area. And you're on about doing these things down here, it's going to be an absolute disaster. But my son was premature, he had a brain hemorrhage, he's disabled, and he's epileptic, so I've got experience quite a lot of all of these things you're talking about. So I'd like to talk to your people when you're going to be considering talking to us about what we need in the area, because it's going to be a complete disaster, and that's just talking about paediatrics, really, and A&E. But in all those areas, it's going to be a disaster. My son actually died in the ambulance, so you can stand there and say, oh, yeah, people might die, that's all well and good. My son actually died in the ambulance trying to get flats in a busy Buckinghamshire, you know, huge area, not in Devon in the back end of nowhere. My son used to be right at hospital for an A&E or somewhere in Chester, people die.
Young lady was waiting a long time.
So angry.
Yeah, I understand. I understand. I've just got to keep.
I just wanted to say that I think when you talk about clinical, earlier on you were talking about clinicians not wanting to, the impression I got, not wanting to be in the back of beyond hospitals where they couldn't practice with hundreds and hundreds of people. Maybe you need to look for different clinicians, quite honestly. This model that you're looking at, it should be based around the people who need it, not around the needs of consultants. And if that means you have to spread further afield to look for them, I would be happy with that.
We do actually go out to national advert, and quite often we'll advertise numerous times nationwide. We'll often use specialists to help us to look for people to go out and try and find the sorts of people. That doesn't always work.
But I'm not sure it would actually work if you had them all in Exeter or all in Plymouth. I think what I'm saying really is I think the model has to be the person-led, like me, you, not the people who work there.
I agree with you, but at the end of the day we also have to make sure that when the more acute services are needed, that the staff and the equipment and the capability to treat people in that situation are available. And we need to make sure that we are able to, for instance, run effective rosters so that when the doctors who do need to treat you, they haven't, worked a 24-hour shift without a break and are likely to make mistakes. We have to take care not just of patients, but we also have to take care of our staff. We owe them a duty too, and to make sure that they are able to practice and that they're able to work in reasonable conditions. So it's not always easy.
Extra staff could be funded by reducing management costs.
Which is simple, getting rid of CCG. The lady there's waiting, and then I've got a gentleman still patient over there, and another lady over here. So keep that order, please, Kimmy.
There are a number of things I would like to say. You talk of new models of care. Historically, the NHS has based its decisions on experience and clinical evidence. New models of care, by their very nature, are guesswork, they're experiments. You are also talking of new models of care being introduced before they've been properly tested, and closing beds which we know work, looking after people in order to do so. Beginning of November, the Royal College of Emergency Medicine, supported by the Royal Colleges of Nursing and Midwives, warned that STPs could have a catastrophic impact on emergency care. They say the multitude of problems facing emergency departments, including the worst 4-hour performance for a decade, staffing shortages and overcrowding, will not be solved by closing departments and shutting beds. Patients will not simply disappear, unless of course you put them into the community and you can't see them anymore. Nor is there any consistent track record of movement of such work into the community. In fact, the reverse has occurred, with a steady rise of emergency department attendances in most systems. On this basis, STPs will certainly not create sustainability, and any transformation that results will not be safe, effective, or patient-centred. You said there was no problem at North Devon last year with acute services, with the emergency department. There was no real crisis. There was no cold snap. There were no flu epidemics. There was nothing that would particularly have caused a crisis. If you're removing beds or planning to remove acute beds because of the movement into the community, surely that's going to cause more problems. Can I also say that a lot of the evidence that's being used for tertiary centres and the like is based upon cities, and it is London and Manchester that are quoted always. In London, we went down from 32 hospitals providing acute stroke to 8, and how wonderful that is. We don't have 32 hospitals within the sort of mileage that exists in a city. You can't get to places so easily from here. think that's all I've got to say for the moment.
Gentlemen over there waiting.
Thank you. I work in adult social care, not the NHS. I work for the council, but I'm here as someone who's concerned about what happens locally. I run the service out of hours. Every weekend I deal with unsafe discharges, people who should not be sent home from major hospitals because there is nowhere else for them to go. Care in the community, even up here, where you'll say that North Devon is now going to be a model for East Devon, it's not working. It used to work when we had community hospitals to send them to, but it doesn't now. All I can do is send them back into a major hospital, clogging it up again. It is not working. And I speak from experience. I would love it to work, because then I wouldn't have grey hair like I have now, because I deal with these every day.
So you described very ably the vicious cycle that we're in. We've got too many people in beds who don't need to be there. We need to move people out. The system is currently clogged up. We can't afford to open more beds, so we need to find another way to ensure that the people who do need a bed need to be there, and the ones that don't can have the care that they receive. As I've said, we need to focus on the people who don't need a bed in order, and what services they do need to be in the community. The only way we can unlock that is by reducing the number of beds and reinvesting the money in community services. And as I pointed out before, you can buy more services in the community than you can run care for within a bedded situation. And actually, you'll know that that is also more beneficial for patients if you're moving the right patients. So I don't disagree with your analogy that there will be patients who are being discharged to where the care package doesn't quite work at the moment. Part of that is because we haven't gone far enough with the investment in community services and primary care to enable it to work. That's what we have to keep plugging away at in order to make it viable in the future. Simply opening more beds is much more costly, much more dangerous, and it's not going to be affordable in the medium term. We will not be able to meet the demand of care if we just treat everybody in a bed.
So you're going down the road of rapid response first?
I am not a clinician, so I can't talk to you, but I talk about the three elements of care that we put in place.
One of them was rapid response.
Yes.
Yeah. So where does that come in with everything else? Because I work in the service, so I understand a lot of how it works. Lots of people here don't. And my understanding and my view of people who don't work in the service is that they don't understand what's going on, they don't understand what questions to ask, and they don't understand what's happening to them, because the change has gone ahead and they feel left behind.
So you're saying that there are concerns amongst staff about?
Not amongst staff, amongst people I know. The amount of times I've said to people, have you been told about this option? Have you been told about that option? Have you been told about the other option? No, they haven't. And it's just because I work in the service and I say to them, these options are available. Most of the time, my friends, my family, my neighbours in my community haven't got a clue.
I think that points to another part of the care model that we need to improve, which is about making sure that we have a much stronger relationship with the people that we're caring for, and that we understand their needs. Actually, navigating the system at the moment is extremely difficult. I know I've had family myself who've been through acute illnesses and so on, and even knowing the system as I do, it is incredibly difficult to work out how to get what you need in the right place. The concept of care coordination is something that is very underdeveloped in the way that we're currently providing services at the moment, and we do need to work on that. That's another key aspect of the care model. The single point of access is a first step around that, coordinating the rapid response. But there's more we need to do, building on the assessment process up front, actually trying to preempt people who might become ill. Many of the reasons that people seek access to A&E, to out-of-hours doctors' services and to other emergency services is because something's happened which is often entirely predictable given that person's state of health. And actually, if we were able to help them and support them and understand what is available to them, we could actually avoid them unnecessarily going into a nursing home or into A&E or into a hospital bed. There's quite a lot we can do around trying to manage demand better. Actually, that doesn't cost us a huge amount more money. It means we just have to work in a different way, and we're not there yet. I think the part of the community care model is also about trying to get multidisciplinary, multi-professional teams working together in a much more integrated way. That isn't something that is a 5-minute job. We need to work with people to build those relationships, to build the interdependencies of services. And as you'll know, that it's not easy because of the differences between things like health and social care funding and where people get their care from, and the fears that people have about needing to pay for care and so forth. Those are all things that we're cognizant of. We're really determined to try and work more to develop that model because we do, and I'm able to stand up here and say I've been through a number of consultations in my career. I do believe that the care model that we're aspiring to here and that we're trying to put in place is genuinely better for patients, and it offers us the opportunity to make sure that your family and friends who may be getting old in the next 5 to 10 years are more likely to be able to access the care they need than if we invest all of our money in beds in community hospitals. It simply won't add up in the future, and actually it's not the right thing to do.
Thank you. Gentleman there, and then the lady over there.
You've constantly referred to cutting clinical costs. I'm over here this way. You haven't mentioned, as the young man on my left mentioned, management costs and incompetent management and wasteful management. I mean, my wife had to go into hospital with something she thought was quite serious and spent the whole day there sitting down, not being seen. And when I went in to pick her up, there were people standing around, there were nurses standing around. One of them was texting on his phone, and there's no management. You know, my wife was a nurse, and in the good old days, when if you hark back to the good old days, there was a sister, there was a matron, and they controlled what went on. There's no control like that anymore. There seem to be more management staff, there are more clerical staff. When you go into booking, you've got 3 or 4 people sitting behind a desk looking at you, and you're cutting, you haven't mentioned cutting back on wasteful and incompetent management.
So I'll ignore the bit about incompetent on the basis that actually I get up every morning and I've worked for 30 years in the NHS to do the best job I possibly can, and I'm very well trained to do it. And I think most people who work in the NHS feel the same. They're also citizens and receivers of care themselves. There is no interest that anyone has in supporting people who don't want to do a competent job. On the management front, part of the £400 million gap that we need to close has led us to look very carefully at the productivity of organisations and our management costs, and there is a significant amount of money that we will be taking out of those kinds of what we call back office services that will enable us to meet some of the demand and to put money into frontline services. The numbers are it's well over 100 million as a whole health system that we wouldn't be needing to save, so a good 25%, and that comes out of things like consolidating or joining together services that we're currently providing in each organisation that would be more cheaply provided if we did it once across a bigger system. Some of it is about the way that we procure things, so our buying power as an NHS is quite high. Sometimes we're not exploiting that, so we're looking at how we procure services and how we buy in goods and services within the NHS. We think we can do better on that, and there is actually quite a sizable price tag before we start going at frontline services that is about looking at those administrative costs. The only point I'd make around management is that if you look at the NHS as a whole in terms of its management overhead, it's significantly less than many other comparable service industries, and it certainly compares very well with health services in the rest of the world.
I think it's probably a catch-22 situation that we're not going to attract clinical professionals down here with the uncertainty of the situation at the moment. There's just not the attraction for people to come and work here. It's not just the consultants and the doctors. I think there's also a real problem in trying to recruit carers for when people are being discharged home. It's a huge problem, I know, in Cornwall at the moment, and people can't even buy care when they're paying themselves. And I wonder if this is going to be looked at in ways of recruiting and training, so that people can be discharged successfully and have the right care package in place.
So thank you. That's a really good question. On the clinical front, one of the things that we're looking at when we're looking at acute services and the issue of clinical staffing, which is an issue for some smaller services, is whether or not we can what we call network clinical teams. So rather than having some clinical teams being standalone, just serving the North Devon hospital population, some of the things that have been implemented elsewhere involve clinical teams basically rotating round. So those that are more skilled, they do get an opportunity to work in a bigger site, but they'll spend some of their time in a smaller site. But it helps us to maintain rotas. It helps us to maintain the skill sets of the clinicians that are in there. That's a very significant option that we will be looking at as we develop the proposals in order to maintain services in the more remote areas. On care staff, you're absolutely right. Recruiting care staff is a challenge. Interestingly, when we recruit healthcare assistants and nursing auxiliary type people in the NHS, we generally get a much better response than care staff in social care. And actually, the skill sets and the services that they provide, and the care they provide, is very similar. So we're trying to look at how we might develop a workforce which is much more interchangeable, that has a more generic set of skills, that perhaps has a bit more of a career structure to it, so that we can encourage more people to go into that profession. It's becoming more and more important. The idea, and someone mentioned the idea of the 15-minute visit where someone just pops in and pops out, is not what we're looking for in the future. It's not appropriate. It doesn't develop relationships with people, and we know that maintaining those relationships and what have you is a really important part of making sure that people are cared for and feel safe. So we're actually looking at things like apprenticeship programs and training programs that may be available much more locally in places like North Devon, where we can start to train staff and make those jobs much more attractive than they are currently. That's the only way I think we're going to be able to grow the need